look at what is the definition of disasters, what are the different types of disasters, and what are the effects of disasters in this particular class. And in the next class, we'll go on to look at what are the concepts of management and how does it apply to disaster. So as you can see, looking back from when this class has been taken, so I've listed here some natural disasters which happened in 2016. Okay, so this is in the last 5 years we're looking at. As you can see, majority of these disasters have been natural disasters. You have storms, wildfires, flooding, earthquakes. Okay, and you can see, I think among all of these, earthquakes are more common. These are some epidemics. Okay, 2016 was a year in which Zika was reported. Okay, in countries. Then we also had MERS, which was reported from Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Then we also had outbreaks of avian influenza, and avian influenza, which was reported even among human beings. So transmission from birds to human. Okay, but thankfully this did not go. It was worried that this had a potential of spreading, but it remained confined. And then, of course, we had huge epidemics of dengue in the African and Indian subcontinent, as well as chikungunya. And in remote parts of Africa, you had outbreaks of yellow fever. So this was another one that we felt the effect of. Even here in Nepal, we had a lot of rainfall because of this cyclone, which happened in the southern part of India. And then we had the swine flu. Okay, so again, swine flu, once a new virus is detected, then it circulates for the next years. And so we've had swine flu, which was detected, and then it has been circulating in the last over 5 to 6 years now. We've had swine flu, which has been circulating as seasonal influenza. And then we all experienced the earthquake in Nepal here. Okay, so we have also experienced this, and there were also other, this was the earthquake that we have experienced, and you can see where the epicenter was. These were listed as the 7 worst disasters in 2017 and 2018, where you had the problem of refugees, you had earthquakes, tsunamis. Okay, look at the hunger crisis, Ebola in DCR, okay, DRC. And of course, we've all been going. Okay, so we have had a huge disaster, a biological disaster, which we saw from 2020. Okay, and look at this. This is the global COVID-19 statistics. This is as recent as the 2nd of August. And as you can see, even as we are speaking, the cases have crossed. So over 200 million people have been affected with COVID, okay, in the last 2 years. These are cumulative cases which have occurred starting from which was reported in Jan of 2020 till now. So this is what the WHO is reporting as. So these are official estimates. So you know these are all underreported. Okay, so governments are all underreporting. So if 200 million people are officially reported to have COVID, then you can estimate the number of people actually who have been. But thankfully, we have had good recovery rate. Globally, you've seen a recovery rate of around 90%. And especially in the first wave, which happened, the deaths which happened, they had higher mortality. And I think especially among healthcare workers, okay, so there was disproportionate. So you can see that the mortality increased with the age-specific mortality increased. Okay, with less mortality among the younger age group, and as the age increased, there was higher mortality. But overall, mortality was around 2.1%. And as you can see that India and Nepal are reporting much lower rates of around 1.3, 1.4% of mortality. Again, these are official rates. And we know about all the bodies that have been floating in the rivers. Okay, so those can also tell you a story. Okay, so we know that we are in the midst of a pandemic, which can be considered as a biological disaster. Now, why are all of these disasters? As you can see, you know, the number of disasters have been increasing. If you look at the last 100 years, there's been definitely an increased frequency of disasters. Now, this is because of the increased burden that we are having. Okay, so we are having an ever increasing global population, which has placing a resource. Okay, all your resources, the natural resources, the technological resource, human resources are all getting strained. Okay, and because of this, this is a portent. This indicates that there will be even greater and more frequent disasters to come. Okay, and which we are actually seeing. If you look every year, we are having more. So these are some natural disasters. This is data which is looking at the last 100 years. And you can see typically, if you look, especially beginning from 1950, it almost looks like a cutoff year. From 1950, you can see the way the disasters have increased, especially if you look at the hydrometeorological ones, okay, in terms of flooding, okay, and then followed by your geological disasters, which are the pink line, and then you have the purple ones, which are your biological disasters. Okay, so epidemics and all of that are also increasing. So it seems to be on the rising trend. So what is a disaster? Okay, so this is a definition, and each word has some importance here. Okay, so a disaster is any occurrence that causes damage, ecological disruption, loss of human life, or deterioration of health and health services on a scale which is sufficient to warrant an extraordinary response from outside the affected community or area. Okay, so anything that causes damage. Now we can have accidents. Okay, so you have a group of people traveling. It could be a car or it could be a bus. Okay, so when the number increases and it causes sufficiently that whatever resources the neighborhood has, it cannot deal with. Okay, that is when we call it as a disaster. So what is important is this is damage, there is loss of human life. That is very important. Loss of human life, or there can be ecological disruption. Okay, so whenever it is on a scale which is sufficient to warrant an extraordinary response from outside the affected community or area, then we call it as a disaster. Okay, so while any loss of life is unfortunate, if it is on a scale where you read an extraordinary response, then only we call it as a disaster. Now, what is a hazard? A hazard can be defined as any phenomenon that has the potential to cause disruption or damage to people and their environment. Now, it's important to understand hazards because what we can do is when you want to look at risk mitigation, how you want to reduce the risk, okay, while we cannot prevent natural hazard disasters, what we can do is we can reduce the risk, okay, we can mitigate circumstances. So that is why it's important that we identify hazards, okay? So all phenomena that have the potential to cause disruption or damage, these are hazards. Disasters can be broadly classified as natural disasters and man-made disasters, but very often natural disasters can lead to man-made disasters as well. Okay, so there's an interaction. So the definition of natural disaster is any catastrophic event that is caused by nature or the natural processes of the earth. Now, the severity of a disaster is measured in terms of lives which are lost, the economic loss, and the ability of the population to rebuild. Events that occur in unpopulated areas are not considered as disasters. Okay, so that's important to keep in mind. Okay, so if a meteor lands in the desert, okay, so then that would be a phenomenon, but that would not be a disaster. Okay, but if it were to land in an area which is populated and cause loss of lives, then that would be a disaster. So a flood or an uninhabited island would not count as a disaster, but flood in a populated area is called as a natural disaster. So these are the 10 most significant natural disasters worldwide. Okay, because based on the death toll. So human lives are important. So the larger amount of death toll that you have, the more severe is the disaster. So if you look back in the last 40 years, okay, these are the ones which have ranked. Okay, so the tsunami which occurred on the 26th of December 2004, as you can see, high loss of life. Okay, more than 220,000 lives have been lost. Okay, so now you can see that the COVID pandemic also will rank up there. Okay, from 200 million, you have 2% of those who are affected who have died. Okay, you can see, so that will also be a large number. Then followed by earthquake. Now again, just look at the number of, just look at the type of disaster, you will see that earthquakes are ranking. Okay, so loss of life is high whenever a earthquake occurs. Okay, so that's what you need to remember. So how do you further classify these natural disasters? They can be classified as meteorological disasters, storms, cyclones, hailstorms, hurricanes, tornadoes, typhoons, snowstorms, cold spells, heat waves, and droughts. Okay, so hurricane and cyclones, and I think these are words which are used okay often, and it depends on which country you're looking at, and so that's how the terminology changes. And you also know that hurricanes and cyclones are named. Okay, so this naming also, they have a pattern on which they name these. Okay, so what you have here is, you can see the tsunami, and you can see a tornado, and you can see a cyclone. Okay, and the drought. Okay, the dry land which emaciated animals there. Okay, meteorological disasters. So windstorms. So cyclones, typhoons, and hurricanes, these are different types of windstorms. Cyclones usually begin as low pressure areas in the equatorial region, and they are a threat in coastal areas. So cyclones are usually problems that are faced by countries that have a coastal line, okay, that have a sea coast. Okay, so that is a cyclone. A tornado is a vortex of air like a cyclone, but it is on a much smaller scale. Okay, that's a tornado. Then you have topological. Now, as the name suggests, this has to do with topology, with the geological aspect. Okay, so this has got to do with the Earth surface. Okay, so with the Earth surface, you have disasters like the earthquakes, you have avalanches where you have snow air. Okay, in mountainous areas which are snowbound, you can have avalanches. Then you can have tsunamis. Okay, tsunamis are actually earthquakes that occur under water surfaces. Okay, so there is an earthquake which occurs under the water surface, and then that causes flooding. Okay, then you can have landslides again in mountainous areas, okay, hilly areas, and you can have flooding. Okay, so wherever there are large water bodies, you can have flooding. Okay, in Nepal, you also see glacier dams glaciers that can burst, or you can have glacial lakes that form, and you can have flash flooding that occurs. So this just, I thought that, just a little bit of terminology to understand. Okay, avalanche is a mass of snow which is set in motion by its weight due to a disturbance in its equilibrium. It's common in mountainous areas, and it can be a surface type where you have the top layer which is getting displaced, or you have a ground avalanche where the whole mass is carried. Okay, tsunamis, like I told you, earthquakes which occur under the water, under the sea. So you have a large displacement of water. Okay, and tsunamis, because there's a large displacement water, it can occur in far-flung areas. So even in areas which are far from the coast can be affected by it. Okay, so far-flung coastal areas can be affected. Like we saw in the 2004 tsunami, we had the epicenter was in near Indonesia and Bali, but the countries which were affected were across. Okay, South Asia was affected, and it was even up to the Maldives. Okay. Flooding, most common natural disaster due to overflowing rivers, heavy rainfall. You can have melting of snow, breaking of dams, glacial lakes. You can also have cyclonic storm surges and tsunamis. All of these can cause flooding. So this is just pictures of real life. Okay, so this gentleman on the yellow boat, this is actually the city. These pictures that you put here is the city of Mumbai in India. This was the flooding that happened because of, during the flash storm that we had. So we actually people had to use boats, okay, to relieve. So you can imagine for people who are handling natural disasters and what kind of things you have to stock up, okay? So where this person is actually rowing is in the middle of a city, okay? But it's totally submerged, and they have to use makeshift raft in order to make their way through. So you can see pictures here of landslide, okay, and this is also this was more to do with the this picture was during the earthquake in Nepal. Then you also have biological disasters. These are epidemics of communicable disease, and that's what we are having right now. We are in the midst of a pandemic. There is no continent that is not reporting the cases, okay? So that's why that's a pandemic, okay? The biological disasters. This picture here, this is taken from the Spanish flu. As you can see, this facilities, large halls were taken in which to accommodate the sick persons. Okay, so you can see this, how you can see, and these similar kind of facilities have been constructed during the pandemic now. Okay, So China was famous. China constructed, within a few days, they were able to raise large structures. Even in India, where we have a huge population, in the major cities, we have big facilities. Okay, stadiums have been converted into isolation and quarantine facilities. Okay, so we have seen this. This was a picture from the Spanish flu. This is, you can see all the people, how you're doing. Even so, people who are especially the bodies which have to be disposed, you can see they all have to be disinfected, then put into the bags. And you can see all the healthcare personnel, the kind of gear that they have to protect themselves with. Okay, and this was during the Ebola outbreak. All right, and we have mask mandates. Okay, you cannot go out without a mandate or you'll be caught by the police. Okay, and this is the ubiquitous mosquito. Okay, and the mosquito has been declared as one of the most dangerous agents, okay, to humankind, and has been responsible for outbreak of so many diseases, okay, malaria, dengue, that has caused a lot of loss of life. Okay, and that's why I put that picture of that mosquito. You can, this is a mosquito which is having a blood meal. Okay, you can see the person has taken and the stomach is engorged with the blood. So these are how globally we are looking at mapping areas for which are at risk of natural disaster. So this is mapping of which are the areas which are at risk, very high risk for natural disasters. And all the areas which are in red are very high risk. And where we are, as you can see, is green. Nepal is in green, where it is at low risk for natural disasters. And you have pale yellow, which is moderate risk, okay, for disasters. So this is how global mapping is being done to assess risk of disasters. Now, how does this risk mapping happen? Now, this is another mapping which is done for seismic hazard. And as you can see, while in natural disasters, Nepal ranked low risk, but when it comes to seismic hazard, Nepal is situated between very high to high risk, okay, because we are located in a seismically active zone. Okay, so this is how risk mapping is carried out for various conditions. Okay, so how is the assessment of risk to natural disasters carried out? So this is carried out by the UN and they calculate using 4 factors. They look at what is the exposure to natural disasters, what is the susceptibility, what are the coping capacities, and what are the adaptive capacities. Okay, so the exposure is the amount of natural hazards that an area is exposed to. Susceptibility refers to the levels of infrastructure, poverty, and nutrition. Coping capacity is the ability to resist the impact of natural disasters through disaster preparedness. And adaptive capacity is the capacity to make structural changes to reduce the impact of natural disasters in the future. When taking all of these factors into consideration, only one factor is totally out of control, which is exposure. Okay, the amount of natural hazards that we cannot control, but all the others these are within our thing. And as you know, all of these other factors, they are exacerbated by poverty. Okay, and if you look at Nepal, what makes us fragile is our coping capacity, the adaptive capacity. Okay, so coping and adaptive as well as susceptibility, because our level of poverty and infrastructure is where we are struggling. So natural disasters strike both developed as well as developing countries. So today we call them as high income countries and low and middle income countries. Okay, and they can cause enormous destruction. They can create human suffering and they can produce negative impact on national economies. And therefore, what you find is that whenever natural disaster strikes, the amount of mortality and the time taken for recovery is more in the developing countries because our structures are still not resilient. Now, what are the effects of disasters? Okay, now, as you can see, based on the type of disaster, so whether it's an earthquake, whether it's because of flooding, tidal waves and floods, okay, you can have effects, similar effects, only thing the intensity will vary. Okay, so most of the disasters will cause death, but you will see more deaths when there is earthquakes and there's tidal floods, what happens during tsunamis. But when you have, the high wind and there's, flooding and things like that, then the death toll is much lesser. So in earthquakes, you get severe injuries which require extensive care. So earthquakes, it can be overwhelming. And in the other things, it can be moderate to few. Now, all disasters will lead to an increased risk of communicable disease because there is overcrowding, okay? Because people will tend to go into a particular area, okay? So there will be overcrowding. All of the people who are affected, we have seen during the earthquake, they had to make those tents and accommodate people inside those tents. And then you will have poor sanitary conditions and there's overcrowding. Wherever there's human to human contact, it also always leads to spread of disease, okay? Then food scarcity. Okay, so normally what happens is whenever people are affected by floods and all of that, there's a high level because everything is flooded and they can't cook for themselves. Well, in earthquake and all that reduces, but still food, one of the responses following any natural disaster is provision of food, okay, for the people. Population displacement, okay, and movements can occur with disaster. It's more when flooding happens because people cannot stay in their house, okay. And during earthquake, people tend to move out, but not as much as during flooding. So I've just had some examples here when volcanic eruptions happen. Okay, that is not very common here in Nepal, but you can have public health problems. Just to give you an example, okay? So you have a variety of acute and long-term health effects because of explosion, lava flow, falling debris. You can have gas which is being released. And for many months following an eruption or ash, you can have exacerbated respiratory illnesses, okay? Volcanic eruptions, these are some just historical bit, okay? I will not focus too much on this because it's not a problem here. But what I will focus on is the public health problems which are associated with flooding, because especially in the low part of Nepal, we have floods, okay? So it extends beyond concerns for mortality, okay, due to drowning. So people can die because of drowning. But one typical example which I can give you is in Bangladesh, when there was a flooding which followed a 1991 tropical cyclone, what happened was whatever water was available from the well, all of them got contaminated. So the potable water was not available. And this led to a widespread outbreak of diarrheal disease. Now, because you had so much of water there all around because of increased humidity and breeding surface, you had a lot of mosquitoes which bred there, okay? And because of this, there was an outbreak of malaria as well as dengue, okay? So whenever you have one particular, remember I told you, you have one disaster which occurs, it can lead to other disasters, okay? It can lead to outbreaks of disease. So therefore, what happens is public health actions after a flood. Okay, so the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami showed that response activities were not effective in curtailing mortality. Okay, whenever there's rapid floods, whatever you do in reaction to that cannot stop. To do is be prepared. You have to be able to identify. Now we have good technology systems you can predict, and you have to evacuate people from that place, whichever is going to be affected. Okay, that would be a best response, because just having response post following it is not going to reduce your mortality. Okay, so therefore, usually whenever you have other actions, whichever follow a flood, you need to have vector control, you need to provide potable water, food, you have to have restitution of vital health services. Now, it's important that even during an emergency, during a disaster, that hospital service, essential hospital care services be available, okay? And that is why even during this pandemic, especially you saw in the initial lockdown when it happened, everything was shut, but we began having reported outbreaks of measles, okay, in the community. And therefore, immediately again, the hospital had to open up, okay? So even if there is a disaster happening, essential hospital services running essential. It may not look too much, but having immunization, family planning services, running OPDs, okay, is important even during a disaster, because then people will get affected if you don't have vital health services, okay? Now, before a flood occurs, you have to have early warning systems. You have to have improved evacuation plan. And even going before that, you should discourage settlement of people in flood-prone areas, okay? So this goes into how you plan and look. Therefore, it's important that you map and identify risk and areas and then have according plans, okay? All of these actions, so public health actions before the event occurs, have much greater potential to save lives than activities which are associated with external emergency response to flood disasters, okay? And then when we look at our disaster management, we will look at the phases that we have and how we can have different actions that you take during, before, and after a disaster. Okay, this is just to show you. Okay, Hudhud. Okay, so it made a landfall. As you can see, people were rescuing. Okay, you have projections, then you have a lot of rumors also. People will talk about the eye of the storm that is passed by, it's going to return. Okay, a lot of panic is there among the people. Can you see here? The first response was even before the cyclone could make landfall, over 4 lakh people were evacuated. So that itself is going to impact the number of people who die. Okay, so it's important that you have evacuation. Now you also have public health problems with earthquakes. Okay, earthquakes we saw, they typically cause traumatic injuries, deaths due to destruction of buildings and infrastructure. Okay, if you look at that famous earthquake that occurred in China in 1976, more than 200,000 deaths. Okay, sudden trauma related deaths. Okay, again, in 2003, it was a relatively moderate one on the scale, but at least 30,000 deaths. Okay, in contrast to floods, the morbidity and mortality of earthquakes is much more immediate. Okay, deaths are primarily due to crush injuries, other trauma resulting from unstable, collapsing, or crumbling buildings. Earthquakes are usually not followed by long-term public health problems such as famine or epidemic. So what we need action is you need to protect health of persons in shelters, you need occupational health protection for rescue workers, and very importantly, you need hospitals which are earthquake resilient. Okay, so now it's become mandatory in the protocols that whenever you build any healthcare facility, it should be earthquake proof, resilient, okay, resist. Because if that structure falls, then what will you take care of the people who are coming in? And it can have post-traumatic stress. So you need to have mental health services for survivors. That is also something that we are talking about now during the pandemic. For people who are socially distanced, sitting at home alone, those who have mental health problems, we are seeing that even in Nepal, which do not see the suicide rate is increasing. Okay, so mental health services, health services, okay, help desk care is important. So over the past 20 years, natural disasters have affected at least 800 million people and caused well over 3 million deaths. Each week, there is at least one natural disaster of sufficient magnitude to require assistance, external assistance from the international community. So you can see how much burden it is having, economic burden. The number of highly vulnerable persons in disaster-prone areas, particularly in the developing world, is at least 70 million people and growing. Okay, so that I think is sufficient for you to emphasize that whenever you talk about disasters, the first chunk of disasters that cause a lot of mortality and morbidity are your natural disasters. Then we come to the man-made disasters. Now everyone is asking this question, is the COVID pandemic, is it a natural disaster or is this a man-made? Okay, that's why the call for the investigation, asking for China to cooperate, to see whether this was actually something that came out of leaked from a laboratory or this was a natural mutation that occurred in the natural circumstance when you had transmission from animals to human beings. Okay. So man-made disasters, they can be classified as accidents. These can be transportation accidents, whether they are in land, air, or sea, collapse of buildings, dam structures, mine disasters, technological failures. Okay, for example, nuclear power station. Now, this all is not here too much in Nepal, right? We don't have a nuclear power station and we don't have too many things, so we don't have to worry too much about a radiation leak or a leak at a chemical plant, okay? But what Nepal has seen in the past is civil disturbance. Okay, so there have been riots, there have been demonstrations, you had a civil movement. Okay, so that is something that Nepal has been familiar with a lot of bandas and strikes that have happened. Warfare. Okay, so actually what is quite clear from this is that the two-legged creatures are far more dangerous to the other. So humans are more dangerous to humans, especially if you look at the numbers that were lost during the World War. Okay. Warfare. So conventional warfare, non-conventional warfare. Okay. So you can look nuclear, biological, chemical. Okay. All of that, including terrorism. These have all become threats for us. Now, refugee situation, even Nepal has been facing with refugees coming in from Myanmar, okay, the Rohingyas, then you have people from other countries, and this is because of religious persecution. You have people from Bhutan, you have people from other parts of Southeast Asia who come to Nepal as refugees. Okay, so Nepal also has a share of refugees. Okay, the refugee flow. Technological disasters, unregulated and unsafe. So Nepal does not have too much of this because we are not a very industrialized nation. So we do not see too much of technological disasters, but overall globally technological disasters are increasingly recognized as an important and common type of disaster. For example, we all know about the nuclear reactor accident at Chernobyl. Then we also had, this was during my childhood, okay, you all were not, probably when your parents were kids, but there was a toxic gas leak in Bhopal, okay, and those people are even suffering now and still awaiting compensation, okay. So this was that happened in Bhopal in India. And also during the breakdown of the Soviet Union, there was a lot of nuclear weapons, chronic environmental pollution, and with the breakdown and with small countries happening, okay. War and conflict. Now, what war and conflict does is that, okay, wherever there's armed conflict, that is where you will have people movement, there'll be displacement, there's breakdown of the healthcare system, and that's where you will have potential outbreak of disease. So if you look at Africa, Sierra Leone, Congo, these are all areas which are afflicted with war and conflict. These are the areas in which you have had outbreaks of Ebola. Now, often what happens is because of poor engineering, improper safety practices, human error, natural disasters can precipitate a technological disaster. Okay, this was seen very well even in Japan. Okay, so when they had a tide flood, the nuclear power plant got affected and there you had leakage. Okay, so these are called as NATEX, where you have natural disasters which cause technological disasters. Okay. So you have gasoline fires, which happen. These are synergistic disasters. Chemical plants, nuclear reactors, other potentially dangerous, whichever are seated in geological areas, which are vulnerable natural disasters. So you can have a combination of disasters happening whenever you have a natural disaster. Landmines. Okay, this is another one. A lot of people, and even Princess Diana was one who had really focused attention on landmines. And countries that are really affected very severely by landmines, most of these are in Africa, where you have Mozambique, Angola, Rwanda, but also Afghanistan is also having a huge problem of landmines. And terrorism. Okay, so terrorist attacks have recently captured attention. Okay, all of us are aware of what happened at the World Trade Center in 2001, and which resulted in almost 3,000 deaths. So an increasingly destructive capacity of terrorist weapons has caused terrorism to be the scourge of the 21st century. Okay, so bioterrorism is another one that we are really worried about. The numbers of casualties arising from terrorist attacks is still dwarfed by those which are because of natural. Okay, so the number of casualty, mortality because of terrorist attack is smaller when you look at natural disasters. But possible deployment of weapons of mass destruction and production of large number of casualties in a single attack is the threat that looms over our heads. So what were the weapons of terrorism? You can use the acronym CBRNE. Okay, so the potential terrorist weapons can be categorized by chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive. Okay, so terrorism is primarily intended to produce fear and panic in a population, and that is what a disaster does. Even today, if you look at COVID, the fear and panic is very high, okay, among people. So the psychological and psychosocial impact usually defines a disaster which is associated with terrorism. Okay, so this we know, this is what we have seen, the Paris attack. Okay, what happened in Brussels? Am I back? Yes, okay. Right, okay, so these are increasingly increasing and okay, so bioterrorism. An anthrax attack on a large city in the developed world could produce as many as 95,000 to a lakh of deaths, okay, 100,000 deaths. These are WHO estimates. So if you look at all what is happening and looking at, okay, so you can see how effective a biological agent can be. Now, what are the potential agents for biological warfare? Being medical students, you should be aware of this. Bioterrorism can come for you as a short note, okay? So these are all the agents which have been identified as having potential for biological warfare. Okay, so all the agents would produce anthrax, that which produces smallpox, plague, tularemia, botulism, and salmonellosis. Okay, now today people are also thinking, is this SARS-CoV-2 also being used as a weapon of biological warfare? Because for the first time, we have a coronavirus which has caused a pandemic in comparison to all the previous pandemics which were caused by type A influenza viruses. Okay, so what people are wondering is the rate at which this virus is mutating and the efficiency which it is getting transmitted from human to human. That is, has this been engineered for human? It looks like that's what is the question being asked. Okay, and this will be the investigation that will take place once we have controlled this pandemic. So that was an introduction to what are disasters and what are the different types of disasters. Now let us look at what is disaster management. Okay, so this is the disaster management cycle, and this is something that you should all be familiar with. Okay, so whenever any question is asked about disaster management, please draw this one. Okay, so this red zone, as you can see, is when the disaster is occurring. So when a disaster occurs, you are then looking at what is the emergency response. So as soon as a disaster occurs and there are lives which are lost, there are injuries, okay, depending on what type of disaster, there is panic, you have to have a good emergency response. So for that, there has to be preparedness, okay, for that response. So that emergency response will include what is the response measures, relief measures, okay, are you evacuating people, what are you doing? Okay, so you can see that following a disaster, a good way to remember is remember all your R's. So you have response, disaster relief. Then you have longer term measures for rehabilitation. And in the long term, we want to have reconstruction. Okay. So whenever we are having after the disaster response, and then we are trying to go on the road to recovery and get back to normal. Okay. Now, before the disaster occurs again, what we can do is what we see as pre-disaster. Okay, so what are the measures we can take in order to reduce the risk of this disaster is what we call as mitigation measures or prevention. Prevention or mitigation. Now, not all disasters can be prevented. If you can prevent the disaster, especially those man-made ones, they are best prevented. Otherwise, we have to mitigate. Mitigate means reduce the risk. And then we have to be prepared. Okay, so we reduce the risk, but at the same time, we are prepared to handle the disaster. Okay, so preparedness. So this is the disaster management cycle. Now, it's important that you understand this phase because medical personnel play an important role in the emergency response. Okay. So what is the disaster response? Disaster response measures are those which are taken immediately prior to and following the disaster. So this disaster response, you want to save life, protect property, and you want to deal with immediate change. So the first thing is in a disaster response is search, rescue, and first aid. Okay. So whether it's flood, whether it's an earthquake, okay, you have to search for the victims, you rescue the victims, and you provide first aid. So most of this comes from immediately from within the community. Okay, so when we're thinking about preparedness, if there are people in the community who know how to handle the situation, then they will be able to organize those efforts. Okay, otherwise it is spontaneous. Whoever is brave and whoever has some clue will come forward to do the search rescue. So we can have teams in the community who are trained for search, rescue, and first aid. Okay, because always the community is the first one to respond. So there's a trigger mechanism for this network. The trigger mechanism is an emergency quick response mechanism, which is like an ignition switch. So whenever you turn that switch on, it sets the vehicle of management into motion so that you are going to have disaster mitigation. Okay, so what are the trigger levels? At level 1, you assess and say, okay, local resources are enough, we can handle it. Level 2, neighborhood support is needed. Level 3 is when national efforts are required. That means you have to call in the army, you have to call in your air force, you have to call in your army, you need help because you're not able to manage. And even your medical facilities are overwhelmed and you need help. So that's where you get. So help comes from the national area, from the center, or it comes from the international area. Okay, so you have to decide which level. So there are triggers. Okay, then the next part of disaster response is the kind of field care that is provided. Okay, so you have to provide proper care to casualties. You have to see how many beds are available, what are the surgical services, how can we maximize them. We have to make provision for food and shelter. Priority has been given for victims identification, and then for those people who have died, you have to provide mortuary spaces where the bodies can be kept and provided. Okay, so that the relatives can come and identify. Okay, again, in a disaster situation, you may not know. Okay, bodies cannot be identified. When we had that unfortunate accident which happened here, where the plane which landed and it burst into fire flames, the people you could not even recognize. Okay, who they were. Identity also was not known. So you had to call in forensic experts to determine whether this was male, female, who is this, and then personal identification marks were used, okay, including even teeth were looked at. Okay, so all of these go into, and you can see the panic and the families coming in. So you have to provide for all of that. So medical care in a disaster, okay, that is called as triage. Now, whenever there's a disaster, you cannot run the hospital like how you normally run your normal OPD. Okay, so you have to have. So even now we have all patients even who come, we have a separate fever clinic and you have patients going to the emergency department. Okay. And because in Nepal, it's a smaller population, imagine if it's a larger thing, imagine the density of people coming. Okay. So therefore we have to use triage. Okay. So all of you should know what is the meaning of triage. I'm sure the word is familiar with you, familiar to you. So triage, first aid, life-saving measures, transport and evacuation for definitive care to hospital are crucial during a disaster. Okay, so mass casualty management demands standard, simple therapeutic procedures. Okay, standardized drugs and medical supplies. During a disaster is not the time where you carry out complex surgeries. Okay, so unfortunately, for those who need more complex things, you have to refer them out to an area, and the field, you have to give priority for those who can be saved by simple therapeutic procedures. Okay, so medical care in a disaster, you have on-site care, establishment of a command post triage team, you have a first aid team, you can have a mobile hospital, you can have an evacuation team, and you need transport and communication. Now, communication is key. Okay, the way you respond is very important during things. So doctors are trained on how to handle media, how to handle family, how to handle relatives, okay, during a disaster. Okay, so triage, which is the important part of your disaster response. Triage is one of the methods to handle mass casualties. So triage consists of classifying the injured on the basis of severities of their injuries and the likelihood of their survival with prompt medical intervention. Higher priority is given to victims whose immediate or long-term prognosis can be dramatically affected by simple intensive care. So this is the most commonly, there are many methods of triage. Every hospital, devices, nations have their own thing. What I am telling you is what is commonly internationally accepted. This is the triage color code system. You can have variations, okay? But this is what is commonly used, okay? So the commonly used colors are black for persons who are dead or moribund, green for ambulatory patients, yellow for those who are medium priority, and persons with high priority are given red tags. Okay, so in a triage color, you have these tags which are available, or you have ribbons which are available, and patients are tagged, okay, with this color code. Okay, and then you know who was that is how you know what is the priority. So how is this tagging done? Now, the most common classifications uses internationally accepted 4-color code. Red indicates high priority treatment or transfer. For example, if the person had had a massive hemorrhage or there is a tension pneumothorax. A yellow signals medium priority. For example, an isolated simple femur fracture, okay, injuries. Green is used for ambulatory patients. Isolated abrasions, contusions, sprains. Black is for those who are dead or those with minimal chance of survival. For example, people with massive head injuries, persons with 3rd-degree burns, 95% burns. Okay, these are all tagged black. Okay, now how a simple way to do this is what we have been taught is if there's a group of people, you just ask people stand up. So whoever can, stand up and, will will stand by struggle can do. Whoever can stand up, okay, they are tagged green. Those who cannot stand up, then they are checked. Okay, can you get, is there breathing, is there available or not? Then you can tag them accordingly. Is the person not responsive? Okay, you can tag. Person is alive, you know, person is breathing, you can see all signs and symptoms of breathing, but they are not able to move, you put yellow. Then you take people whom you feel are severe, they're not moving, but these people can be really need your immediate attention, then you tag them red. So those who are not able to move but need immediate attention, not too seriously ill, you can tag them red. Okay, so this is one that is used. Okay, so if people are moving, walking, wounded, green. Okay, if there is no respiration, you cannot feel any breathing after head tilt, you put black. Okay, they are breathing, but they are unconscious, you tag them red. Okay, respiratory, if it's over 30, perfusion, they can look at the capillary refill time. Okay, mental status, if they're not unable to form, based on all of that, okay, you can do this tagging. Okay, that's how you use. Okay, now if you put otherwise, then you put that as they don't need your immediate attention, they get the yellow tag. Okay, so the simple way to remember is remember respiratory rate 30 if they are over 30, and what is your perfusion, capillary refill if it takes more than 2 seconds, or if there is no radial pulse. Okay, and then M is if mental status, they are unable to follow simple commands. Okay, that will be graded as depending, that is how what you will use in order to see whether you want to grade them as red, yellow, green or black. Okay, so now we can look at further parts of the response. Now it goes into the administrative part. Okay, tagging. Okay, so you want to patient should be identified with tags. So you have to have what is the name, age, place of origin, what is the triage category, and what is the diagnosis, and what is the initial treatment that was given. Now this is standard recommended. Then we come to the more unfortunate part of the disaster response is those people who you have identified as dead. Now it's important that you take good care of the dead because you have to remove them from the disaster scene, you have to shift them to the mortuary, you have to take care of family members who are panicking, and you have to take the help of the relatives for identification. Okay, so this is an important part from the human ethical aspect where the care of the dead is important. Okay. Now, what is disaster recovery? Disaster recovery is the process by which communities and the nations are assisted in returning to their proper level of functioning following a disaster. Okay. The type and quantity of humanitarian relief and recovery supplies are determined by two factors. What is the type of disaster and what is the type and quantity of supplies which are available locally? Okay. So this is an illustration. Okay. Now, whenever a disaster occurs, even common commodities begin to get expensive. Okay. So water becomes at a premium. Okay. Food is at a premium. You have damaged structures. All of these are your reconstruction and rehabilitation challenges. Okay. One thing that is common to all disasters . One thing that is common to all disasters is the social reaction. Okay, you can have spontaneous behavioral reactions. There's panic, people are stunned. Sometimes, unfortunately, during a disaster, there will be some people who go on a widespread looting. Okay, they also have rumors regarding spreads of epidemic. You can have population displacement. Okay, we have seen that. Okay, people can get displaced. So population displacement, you can have excessive burden. So people are either going to their relatives, friends' place. If they don't, those who don't have will go and occupy whatever spaces available in the public. Okay, so all the parks which are there in the parks, squares, vacant lots, government buildings, all of these can be occupied. We have seen. Okay, what I think I will do is we have taken sufficiently, it's almost 50 minutes since we have taken the start of the class. So I will stop now for today and I will continue my class in the next session. Okay, in the next class. So I will see you all for the next class. Okay, stay safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.